Hi everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Gio, and today we're going to do Chapter 8 for The Dark. The Medical Center, Nuestra Colony, Rias. When I woke, Ian was gone. Several parts were cut and waiting for me. It took only a few minutes to micro-weld them on the arm. The framework was done, the hand assembly was done, but the nanite muscles could wait until tomorrow. My dad was a lefty, and Ian was a righty. The principles were the same, but reversed. The components Ian needed were in my dad's arm. How many times had I rebuilt it over the years? Dad only complained once, when I had set the gain too high. It took 7 tries to get it right. Breaking my dad's arm down into component parts was hard. Not physically, but emotionally. It sounds crazy, but it felt like I was dismantling my dad. Just off of Salvage is the Nuestran graveyard. It would be more convenient to break the bodies down and feed them to hydroponics. Nobody liked the idea. Instead, we cremated them and had a cremation garden. Walking through it required a vac suit, and it was like walking through history. My great-grandparents are buried there, among with the rest of the founders of Nuestra. Except my great-grandfather. He was lost when the LREV Joya de Vida disappeared. They have a little plaque for him, and I'm halfway finished with my replica of the Joya, which will someday join the plaque. I want to be like my great-grandfather and see the stars. He was one of the pilots of the Joya. It's the reason I want to go to the Lunar University, become a pilot, and travel. My dream is to someday be on the Zhanghe and travel further than any other human has ever done. As I shifted my position on the cushion, my foot moved the elbow actuator out of alignment. Of course I put it back into place. I wish I could do the same with my dreams. When Ian and Doc were talking about my condition, I overheard it. It might be years before I'm well enough to go into jump space, if ever. Spacers call any condition which traps you in one system jump negative. I took the power cell from the new arm and attached it to the rebuild. With Dad's old power cell added to the new one, it should last twice as long between recharges. Dad would have wanted someone to use the parts. That's the Nuestran way. Dad would have liked Ian, or I hoped he would have. Once I set the arm down, I reworked the shoulder diagram on the floor. Next to the diagram, I drew a side view of the Adi Shachar, the crashed cargo hauler, the ship that had brought Ian to Nuestra. I've never built a cargo hauler before. Maybe it could be a memorial. As I leaned back, I shut my eyes and pictured it. Yes, I know what it looked like. Months back, when the crew had left for a night of drinking, I went to the spaceport, climbed into a vac suit, and took measurements, walked around it, felt the slight rumble of the engines on idle. Someday, I wanted to be on her, or the Orion's Belt, or some ship. If I kept it small, maybe as long as my forearm, I could build a small model of the Adi Shachar. No way would I build it the size of the LRCD Venganza de Dios. That took far too long and weighed 45 kilograms. LRCD means Long Range Corporate Destroyer. The Venganza de Dios is the greatest ship in the Bentley-Thwaite arsenal of ships. Its presence was usually enough to stop any conflict. Nearly a kilometer long, if it got too close to a station or a colony, the colony rumbled from its grav engines. "Doc, would you unhook me so I can use the restroom?" I called. A minute later, Doc came in bringing something that looked like a crutch, but with a hole for an arm. I redesigned it 3 different ways by the time he got to me. Doc took one look at the cart. It had about 10 pieces cut out of it, and I think I could easily get another 10. Doc frowned and sighed. "You owe me a new cart. That one was brand new and shiny." "That flimsy thing?" I said, and smiled, but it turned into more of a grimace as I tried to stand. "It could only hold 20 or 30 kilos. I'll build you a better." The room spun fast. My legs collapsed, and the floor and the ceiling spiraled together. Doc caught my arm and guided me into a sitting position on the bunk. "I'll hold you to it. Remember, shiny." It took a moment before the room righted itself. Closing my eyes, I fought the vertigo, and my stomach lurched. I took a breath, settling my stomach. Somehow, I continued the conversation, but the words were odd, broken. "Shiny, got it. You okay?" Doc asked. "Ask me tomorrow," I said, and tried again to stand. But this time I succeeded, but only because I swayed into Doc and he held me for a moment while my feet steadied. Doc unhooked the IVs and nanite cuff and led me to the restroom. When I finished, he led me outside and sat me on a bench. "You're getting some fresh air and a change of scenery." "I'm driving you crazy already," I said. "Yep. Remember, shiny," Doc said, and smiled as he went back inside. He left me the crutch thing. I sat on a metal bench that let me look down the road that led to one of the airlocks. Each dome had 2 entrances, the tram tunnel on the point closest to the central dome, and an outer airlock located on the far side of the dome. Well, the central dome had 6 entrances, 4 tram tunnels, and 2 airlocks. "Initiating night mode in 15 seconds, the Nuestran AI said. We called her Madre, on account of the name of the colony. Nuestra Madre, our mother, and she handled a lot of the automated functions of the colony. The lights dimmed to twilight. True darkness signaled a disaster, because that would mean the reactor had failed. It had been 2 weeks or more since I had even been this far outside medical, and though I had just woken up, it seemed a lifetime ago. Normally, I would be up, building or repairing, or out in salvage looking for parts. Never sitting like this. Never this tired. I don't know when I fell asleep and crumpled sideways on the bench, but when I woke, it was still night mode. If I had the strength, I would walk to the tram, take it to North Dome, and walk to Tower 7, my apartment. Instead, I levered myself up using the crutch and the bench and walked back into medical. Doc was checking on another patient, so I went to my bunk, sat on a cushion, and began work on the nanogel bicep. In many ways, the muscle would mimic a real arm. Nanogel muscles had a big advantage over robotic prosthetics. They had nanite linkages to the actual shoulder nerves, and the arm would mimic normal motor control if the gain was high enough. Too high and it would cause minor shocking. My dad never complained about that, but his sudden jump said enough. Nobody knew I gave his arm its own AI module to regulate function and movement. The module came from an old crawler and was about the size of the end digit of your littlest finger. I figured it was salvage, and what Doc didn't know wouldn't hurt him. After all, who would ever include an AI in an arm? Everybody, when they realized how smooth it made the arm move. I took Dad's old AI and attached it to the primary circuits of the new arm and fed it a little power. It would begin directing self-repair functions and seal the nanite linkages to form a smooth signal with Ian's nerves. I hope Dad would have liked Ian, because I did. When I'm better, I need to visit the crematorium garden and tell Dad about the crash and the pilot I rescued. It took me an hour to cut the rest of the pieces from the cart and other bits of scrap. Fitting them into the arm and micro-welding them in place took another hour. With all the pieces cut and fitted, the rest of the cart and other metals were scrap. I took out what I needed for the Adi Shachar project and placed the rest into a box. No one disturbed me for the next hour, and I got the entire bicep, tricep, shoulder assembly done. Alternating bands of gray metal mixed with the shiny metal of the cart with the blue sparkle of the nanogel muscles. I hope Ian liked it. I worked a few designs in the metal to make it artistic and spectacular. Dad would have liked it. I don't remember passing out, but I woke back in the bunk. nanocuff on, and only one IV this time. No blood cuff. I had worn it and the nanocuff so much that they had left permanent indents on my arm and leg, with little round scars where they had punctured my skin. My permanent souvenirs from my big adventure. Raffaella might be able to buff them out, but I think I'll keep them. Both Doc and Ian had said that I had flatlined twice. Would I have done anything different? I'd get the heavy-duty suit fixed earlier in the shift, maybe even days earlier. Otherwise, no. Since Manuel had left and Dad died, I had been running from project to project to escape my life. Rescuing Ian had been another project, but one that was a bit different. Somebody needed help. I snuck a glance at Ian as he snored in his bunk. What I wouldn't give to be able to sail among the stars like he did, like Great-Grandpa did. With my datapad, I synced into Madre and Medical and accessed my files. Technically, it wasn't illegal because they were mine. There was my complete life history. I skipped that part and zoomed into the most recent, the crash of the Adishachar. It linked to too many files. Ian's as well, but I only cared about mine. Doc needed a better privacy lock, but nobody expected a custom dual-core AI to sneak around. I never looked into anybody else's files. I didn't want to. In a colony this close, you respect each other's privacy. It turned out that my file held more information than I wanted to read, but I did anyway. There was over 200 pages of information, plus links to dozens of other files, including a full readout of the Audi. I set my datapad on low audio, sat on the cushion, and resumed work on the arm, listening. I reconfigured the elbow assembly, then forearm muscles, and hooked up a power recharger to run a mild current through the arm. I drew the same metallic pattern across the arm and adjusted the nanite fibers to glow more. Both times I had flatlined had been on the first day. As each day progressed, my marrow degenerated. Near the end of the first week, Doc had tested my sister for genetic instabilities and discovered we both shared a family issue involving the marrow. He wanted to test my other blood relative, Perlita, but she was too busy with important things. The radiation had zeroed in on my marrow, and nothing Doc had done proved effective. I had gone through all the synthetic blood he had, and only with the next generation nanites from Campbell Station did I finally stabilize. It was a fragile stability. One jolt of energy or one serious stress could knock me back into the coma or kill me. The final page scared me. It was a page Doc wouldn't want me to know about, but I charged in anyway. It was a price breakdown of all he had done to keep me alive. With the new nanite treatments, it had pushed the upper limit to well over 1 million credits. I sucked in a breath and held it. I wasn't worth that much. I set the parts and tools down and stared at the white ceiling. Why would anybody spend that kind of money to keep me alive? The depression I'd been fighting? I lost that battle, and the dull ache I pretended didn't exist? It hurt. I didn't want to work anymore. The hole I felt when Dad died? It was back and became bigger. I stared at the shoulder assembly drawing, not seeing it. I didn't move, didn't think. Just felt the loss of my dad, my life, my dreams. I passed out on the cushions again, but my full bladder woke me. Somebody had put me back in the bunk again. The cat purred by my ear, and all I could think about was how much I cost. Using the datapad to call Rias, I sat up and waited. As expensive as my treatments were, they were nothing compared to the cost of the Adishachar, of the lost ore, of Robinson's life. I reached for the arm to make some adjustments. The arm was gone. So was Ian. Elias came in, unhooked me, and I had freedom for a few minutes. A few minutes under the refresher, and clean jeans and wife beater, and I felt stronger. I walked outside on my own this time, but only as far as the bench. No one else was there, so I laid on the bench, stared at the inner structure of the dome, and thought, if I were to create a Dagger XF, What parts would I use? While my mind designed the short-range craft on one level, another relived the events of that day, the crash, the exposure, saving the others. For the first time since my father died, I slowed down enough to feel his loss. The loneliness I felt without him, the despair. He was my dad. Sometimes he was the only person who believed in me. Only my dad had the patience to put up with me. No one else did. Not Doc, not Manuel, not Marcial, especially not Perlita. But Dad did. I went back inside, sat on the cushion, and pulled up the image of the Dagger XF. A simple design, practical and functional, like all ships designed by colonists. Ian and his arm were still gone. Doc was probably working on the shoulder collar that would connect the arm to Ian. I took the scraps from the box, cut out a dozen or so pieces, and built a simple model of the Dagger. Not a replica. I didn't have the equipment to create the electronics. I don't remember how I got back into bed, or how the nanocuff was reattached, or when the lights were dimmed to night mode. Ian and the arm were back, as well as a note from Doc. Just like always, it's set too high. Ian slept. The arm rested on a different cart. Stiff, I climbed out of bed, too filled with thoughts and emotions to sleep. My brain had too much to process, and somewhere inside me, a small fear germinated. Dying was hard to get used to, and learning that I was days away if the treatments failed ate at my soul. Datapad, sync into Ian's arm and display diagnostics. Yes, it could do that easily, because both had AI modules now. Technically, I could sync with anything that had an AI, like grav lifters and crawlers. The stats of the arm appeared on my datapad. It only took a second to adjust the gain and the amp, trimming them by 10%. Time to become sane again. Taking the arm, I decided to focus on the hand assembly. Then it would be time to attach the clear skin. Each finger had its own nanomuscles, as did the hand. The higher-end models replicated movement almost like the real thing. How many times had I tried, only to watch my dad's hand not function as planned? I had learned so much, but that didn't count. Only the final product did. And with Dad's, it took months, but I finally got it right. By the time I finished, Ian's new fingers would move as well as his old ones did. What I learned from all the years working on Dad's arms, I applied to Ian's. It's insane to spend so much time on somebody I didn't know, on a project I'd never see again, on a person, on a man I'd never see again. Ian is a spacer, and would leave Nuestra as soon as his captain came back for him, and Doc cleared him for duty. All this time, and all this effort, for a man I didn't know, and who would probably forget me as soon as he left medical. It's better that way. Just ask Doc, Manuel, and Perlita. I drive people crazy. Always moving, always doing, always taking things apart and putting them back together. Most people don't tolerate me. Except now, I have to slow down. I'm barely a step above an invalid. It took 2 hours and the hand was finished. Next, the clear skin. If I do it right, Ian will eventually be able to feel. Another hour and that's done. It's easily as good as my replica for the Venganza de Dios. Filigreed etching across every metallic band, alternating bands of gray metal and the shiny metal, sparkling blue nanomuscles. It even had blinking lights that shifted with activity level. I guess I set a new standard for myself. It was the nicest thing I had ever made. I set it on the cart, hooked it to the charger, and allowed myself a smile. I hope Ian liked it. The display on the wall said 4 a.m. Night mode. I tidied up the space, put the scrap back into the box, and erased my designs and calculations from the floor. Doc would be happy, because the space looked clean and normal again. The simple model of the dagger I left on my bed with a note that it should go to Mr. Gunther. I don't care what anybody says. I'm going home. This early in the morning, no one is at the reception desk, so I walked into the clean air of South Dome. It took me a long time to get to the tram station because I had to stop and rest at every bench. Leaving medical was a bad idea, but I'm going home anyway. The tram arrived. I got on, taking a seat by the door, and in 20 minutes, I'm in North Dome. I get off of the tram and limp to the food court for a rest. A frozen mango smoothie and a chocolate chip cookie sounded so good, and I took them to go. I sipped the drink and nibbled on the cookie. Real food. At last. My apartment is in Tower 7, located at the edge of the dome. Most people want a tower near the food courts or the shops. Not me. My family's unit is close to the dome wall and lets me see the stars. I can't believe how divine chocolate is. North Dome was the first dome of Nuestra Colony. 150 years old, it showed the age, in spite of the fresh paint. The filters here aren't as good as the ones in South Dome or Central Dome, so it smelled a little like Dad's old socks some days. Like today. Hector Alvarez, a retired astrogator, was in charge of North Dome atmospherics, and no matter what his team does, there's always that smell. Marcial and Perlita hated North Dome because of the smell and seldom came over. Like South Dome, North Dome has fresh food growing everywhere, up and down every building, in planters, in gardens, and in the 2 parks. It's like pictures of what Terran jungles used to look like 400 years ago, before Terra became one massive city. It took me another 5 minutes to get to Tower 7, and I took the lift up to the 10th floor and down the hall to my place. Rafaela has the door opposite. One palm print later, and I'm in. Very tidy, just the way I need it. I have 3 projects laid out. The table has the Joya de Vida lined up so I can build it. My tools are out of order so I quickly adjust them. A small side table has a tattoo gun I'm rebuilding for Rafaela. When my last off shift ended, I didn't have time to go to salvage to find what I needed. Then I was on shift, and then the accident. The kitchen bar had everything I needed to work on my father's arm. It's been like that for 2 months, ever since the funeral. Cleaning it up would mean that I would have to accept that he was dead. I guess it was time, but I needed to rest. The apartment had 1 main room with a bar, kitchen, and living room combo, and 4 small side rooms. One was the refresher and toilet. One had been mine and Manuel's, now just mine. One used to be Dad's, and one was Dalila's. My sister's room was empty. They had moved her to another family. My dad's room had all his old things, including my first model. It was a shuttle, but when I look at it now, I see weld marks and bent parts and tool marks. I didn't know then how to wire it with lights. I can do so much better now, but Dad said it was his favorite. My room was refreshingly normal. Everything lined up, organized, and waiting for me. Setting the smoothie on my desk, I released the crutch and collapsed on my bed. I took a breath and relaxed. I'm finally home. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time. Peace.